Hi, and welcome back to Stories of the Saints. On October 1st, we celebrate the feast day of Saint Therese of Lisieux. Generations of Catholics have admired this young saint, calling her the Little Flower, and she founded in her short life more inspiration for their own lives than in volumes by theologians. Yet, Teresa died when she was only 24 years old after having lived as a cloistered Carmelite for less than 10 years. She never went on mission, never founded a religious order, never performed great works. The only book of hers published after her death was a brief edition version of her journal called Stories of a Soul. But within 28 years of her death, the public demand was so great that she was canonized. Over the years, some modern Catholics have turned away from her because they associate her with over-sentimentalized pity, and yet the message she has for us is still as compelling and simple as it was almost a century ago. Teresa was born in France in 1873, the pampered daughter of a mother who had wanted to be a saint and a father who had wanted to be a monk. The two had gotten married, but determined they would be celibate until a priest told them that that was not how God wanted a marriage to work. They must have followed his advice very well because they had 9 children. The 5 children who lived were all daughters who were close all their lives. Tragedy and loss came quickly to Teresa when her mother died of breast cancer when she was 4.5 years old. Her 16-year-old sister, Pauline, became her second mother, which made the second loss even worse when Pauline entered the Carmelite convent 5 years later. A few months later, Teresa became so ill with a fever that people thought she was dying. The worst part of it was that Teresa was all the people sitting around her bed staring at her like she had a string of onions. When Teresa saw her sisters praying to the statue of Mary in her room, Teresa also prayed. She saw Mary smile at her, and suddenly she was cured. She tried to keep the grace of the cure secret, but people found out and badgered her with questions about who Mary was and what Mary was wearing, what she looked like. When she refused to give in to their curiosity, they passed the story that she had made the whole thing up. Without realizing it, by the time she was 11 years old, she had developed the habit of mental prayer. She would find a place between her bed and the wall, and in that solitude think about God, life, and eternity. When her other sisters, Marie and Leonie, left to join religious order, Teresa was left alone with her last sister, Celine, and her father. Teresa tells us that she wanted to be a good, but that she had an odd way of going about it. Every time Teresa has ever imagined that someone was criticizing her or didn't appreciate her, she burst into tears. Then she would cry because she had cried. Any inner wall she built to contain her wild emotions crumbled immediately before the tiniest comments. Teresa wanted to enter the Carmelite convent to join Pauline and Marie, but how could she convince others that she could handle the rigors of Carmelite life if she couldn't handle her own emotional outburst? She had prayed that Jesus would help her, but there was no sign of an answer. On Christmas Day in 1886, the 14-year-old hurried home from church. In France, young children left their shoes by the fireplace floor at Christmas, and then parents would fill them with gifts. By 14, most children outgrew this custom, but her sister Celine didn't want Teresa to grow up, so they continued to leave presents in baby Teresa's shoes. As she and Celine climbed the stairs to take off their hats, their father's voice rose up from the living room below. Standing over the shoes, he sighed, "Thank goodness that the last time we shall have this kind of thing." Teresa froze, and her sister looked at her helplessly. Celine knew that in a few moments Teresa would be in tears over what her father had said. But the tantrum never came. Something incredible had happened to Teresa. Jesus had come into her heart and done what she could not do herself. He had made her more sensitive to her father's feeling than her own. She swallowed her tears,
walked slowly down the stairs, and exclaimed over the gifts in the shoes, as if she had never heard a word her father said. The following year, she entered the convent. In her autobiography, she referred to this Christmas as her conversion. Teresa was known as the Little Flower, but she had a will of steel. When the superiors of the Carmelite convent refused to take Teresa because she was so young, the formerly shy little girl went to the bishop. When the bishop also said no, she decided to go over his head as well. Her father and sister took her on a pilgrimage to Rome to try to get her mind off this crazy idea. Teresa loved it. It was the one time when being little worked to her advantage. Because she was young and small, she could run everywhere, touch relics and tombs without being yelled at. Finally, they went for an audience with the Pope. They had been forbidden to speak to him, but that didn't stop Teresa. As soon as she got near him, she begged him to let her enter the Carmelite convent. She had to be carried out by 2 of the guards. But the vicar general, who had seen her courage, was impressed, and soon Teresa was admitted to the Carmelite convent that her sister Pauline and Marie had already joined. Her romantic ideas of the convent life and suffering soon met up with the reality in a way she had never expected. Her father suffered a series of strokes that left him affected not only physically, but mentally. When he began hallucinating and grabbed for a gun as if he was going to battle, he was taken to an asylum for the insane. Horrified, Teresa learned of the humiliation of the father she adored and admired, and of the gossip and pity of their so-called friends. As a cloistered nun, she couldn't even visit her father. This began a horrible time of suffering when she experienced such dryness in prayer that she stated, "Jesus isn't doing much to keep the conversation going." She was so grief-stricken that she often fell asleep in prayer. She consoled herself by saying that mother loved children when they lay asleep in their arms, so that God must love her when she slept during prayer. She knew as a Carmelite nun she would never be able to perform great deeds. Love proves itself by deeds, so how am I showing my love? Great deeds are forbidden to me. The only way I can prove my love is by scattering flowers, and these flowers are every little sacrifice, every glance and word, and the doing of the least actions for love. She took every chance to sacrifice, no matter how small it would seem. She smiled at the sisters she didn't like. She ate everything she was given without complaining, so that she was often given the worst leftovers. One time, she was accused of breaking a vase when she was not at fault. Instead of arguing, she sank to her knees and begged forgiveness. These little sacrifices cost her more than bigger ones, for these went unrecognized by others. No one told her how wonderful she was, these little secrets of humiliations and good deeds. When Pauline was elected prioress, she asked Teresa for the ultimate sacrifice. Because of politics in the convent, many of the sisters feared that the family Martin would take over the convent. Therefore, Pauline asked Teresa to remain a novice in order to allay the fear of the others that the 3 sisters would push everyone around. This meant she would never be fully professed a nun, that she would always have to ask permission for everything she did. This sacrifice was made a little sweeter when Celine entered the convent after her father's death. 4 of the sisters were now together again. Teresa continued to worry about how she could achieve holiness in the life she led. She didn't want to just be good. She wanted to be a saint. She thought there must be a way for people living hidden, little lives like hers. I have always wanted to become a saint. Unfortunately, when I have compared myself with the saints, I have always found that there is the same difference between the saints and me as there is between a mountain whose summit is lost in the clouds and a humble grain of sand trodden underfoot by passers-by. Instead of being discouraged, I told myself, God would not make me wish for something impossible, and so, in spite of my littleness, I can aim at being a saint. It is impossible for me to grow bigger, so I put up with myself as I am, with all my countless faults, but I will look for some meaning of going to heaven by a little way, which is very short and very straight, a little way that is quite new. We live in an age of invention. We need no longer climb laborious up flights of stairs. In well-to-do houses there are lifts, and I was determined to find a lift to carry me to Jesus, for I was far too small to climb the steep stairs of perfection. So I sought in Holy Scriptures some idea of what this life I want would be, and I read these words: "Whosoever is a little one, come to me. It is your arms, Jesus, that are the lifts to carry me to heaven. And so there is no need for me to grow up. I must stay little and become less and less." She worried about her vocation. I feel in me the vocation of the priest. I have the vocation of the apostle. Martyrdom was the dream of my youth, and this dream has grown with me. Considering the mystical body of the church, I desire to see myself in them all. Charity gave me the key to my vocation. I undertook that the church had a heart and that this heart was burning with love. I understood that love compromised all vocations, that love was everything, that it is embraced all times and places. In a word, that it was eternal. Then in the excess of my delirious joy, I cried out, "O Jesus, my love, my vocation, at last I have found it. My vocation is love." When an antagonist was elected prioress, new political suspicions and plots sprang up. The concern over the Martin sisters perhaps was not exaggerated. In this small convent, they now made up 1/5 of the population. Despite this and the fact that Teresa was a permanent novice, they put her in charge of other novices. Then in 1896, she coughed up blood. She kept working without telling anyone until she became so sick, a year later everyone knew it. Worst of all, she had lost her joy and confidence and felt she would die young without leaving anything behind. Pauline had already written down her memories for a journal, and now she wanted her to continue, so they would have something to circulate on her life after her death. Her pain was so great that she said that if she had not had faith, she would have taken her own life without hesitation. But she tried to remain smiling and cheerful, and succeeded so well that some thought she was only pretending to be ill. Her one dream was the work she would do after her death, helping those on earth. "I will return," she said. "My heaven will be spent on earth." She died September 30th, 1897, at the age of 24 years old. She herself felt it was a blessing God allowed her to die at exactly that age. She had always felt that she had a vocation to be a priest, and felt God let her die at that age. She would have been ordained if she had been a man, so that she wouldn't have to suffer. After she died, everything at the convent went back to normal. One nun commented that there was nothing to say about Teresa. But Pauline put together Teresa's writings and heavily edited them, but unfortunately sent 2,000 copies to other convents. But Teresa's little way of trusting in Jesus to make her holy and rely on small daily sacrifices instead of great deeds appealed to the thousands of Catholics and others who were trying to find holiness in ordinary lives. Within 2 years, the Martin family had to move because the notoriety was so great, and by 1925, she had been canonized.
Therese of Lisieux is one of the patron saints of the missions, not because she ever went anywhere, but because of her special love of the missions and the prayers and letters she gave in support of missionaries. This is a reminder to all of us who feel we can do nothing, that it is the little things that keeps God's kingdom growing. If you like this video about Saint Therese of Lisieux, please press the like button. And if you'd like to learn more about the saints, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, if you want to become a premium member and watch cinematic movies about the saints, all you have to do is go to ChristianChannel.com and support us by subscribing to our yearly streaming service on your smart TV. Thank you for watching, and God bless.